All right, well, I'm going to call this meeting of the Addison Central School District to order at 6:31 today, August 22nd. It's great to see you all in person. Let's start with introductions down here with Dr. Malcolm.
Chip Malcolm.
Suzanne Buck. Victoria Jetty.
Peter Burrows, Superintendent.
Jamie McCallum.
Brian Bauer.
Joanna Doria.
Barb Wilson.
Nergis Anzali, Student Representative.
Barry Gill.
Steve Warzak.
Peter Conlon.
Jen Newseeder.
Will Hatch, Technology Director.
Nicole Carter, Director, Equity and Student Services.
Caitlin Steele, Assistant Superintendent of Teaching and Learning.
James Seeger, member of Brickton Township. Just interested.
And online, Lindsay's trying to get in. She sent a message. The Zoom link
Mary
isn't
Heather
working.
Noble.
Logan?
Logan Price, Business Manager.
Did she get in? Okay. And Lindsay.
She has to be moved.
She has to
I moved her earlier. She's coming.
She's
She
coming.
texted and said that the link wasn't working right for her.
All right, well, Lindsay will be joining us momentarily as fast as the world of the internet can move. And since we had a member of the public introduce themselves, we don't want to make you feel left out. So why don't you introduce yourself?
Tanya Scuteri.
Great, thank you. And then, Will, if you could read to us attendees, please, that'd be great.
Sure. We have John Flowers, Lorraine Morse, MCTV, Molly Witters, and Bruce Bernstein.
Thank you. At this time, we will open it up to public comment. If there's anyone in the room who'd like to make a public comment, please raise your hand, as well as on Zoom, raise your Zoom hand. We'll start in the room and we'll move to online. Tanya.
So thank you all. This is my first time attending in person with some of the new board members, so it's nice to see everyone. And I did draft it just so I don't forget anything. So my comment tonight is about all of the public engagement that was done over the last several years since I've been sort of involved with this district. There's been an amazing amount of time and energy that's gone into public events, porch conversations, some roundtable discussions. I've attended many of them. And I guess I thought the intent was to get feedback from the communities that would help guide the direction of the board and guide decisions. And so one idea that had come up consistently and repeatedly and still continues to come up is changing the charter to include a town vote for school closure. At one point there was a petition submitted. I think it got around 900 signatures. And that, of course, we know didn't go anywhere. And so I do understand we voted on the charter, we voted to consolidate, that's a whole different conversation. But I do think it's important that even if a decision's made, to always reflect back, to recognize where we could have done better, where we might have done things differently, and then take measures to improve or take measures to sort of correct that. And I know some strong proponents of Act 46 have actually come out and said they no longer support it, that it's not doing what it was intended to do. And some have even gone so far as to say it should be repealed. So I just think it's really important that we leave the possibility open that we would change the charter, given that the community has so strongly and consistently asked for that change. And I just think it would be really good to have that conversation and talk about it and have that possibility on the table as we move forward as a district. Thank you. Oh, and Tanya Scuteri Shoreham.
Thank you, Tanya.
Knowing that I'm going to have limited opportunity to speak, I'll speak now. So Jim Seeger from Ripton. I've been a school board member in my former town in Connecticut, and pretty heavily involved in multiple schools, have children in multiple schools. I don't know all the specifics. I just moved to Vermont a year ago. I've got two children, one moving up from elementary to middle school, another one in a private school currently, moving into the high school eventually. I understand what's been going on with Ripton. We had a similar thing happen in my last town. And I'll just quickly just say I support the change in the charter because if there's an effort to close Ripton School, you don't understand what Ripton School is. Between the additional busing, between what Ripton School has been, it's been the best school we've ever contacted far and away. It's been amazing for our children. And to close that, and now we're afraid to bring, my daughter's about to go into MUMS, and because of the large school system in 6th grade, there's some complications there that we all know about, we all acknowledge. I think for you to consider closing it, or anybody to consider closing it, is short-sighted for whatever reason, especially if Ripton has a growing population currently, one of the largest in Addison County, I believe, currently. So I just think it's short-sighted. I just want to put that out there, and I think that if there's a way to allow the town to make that decision versus at a financial level for a board that's maybe not entirely clear, that should be considered. Thank you.
Thank you. And any public comment on?
We have Lorraine.
Great. Lorraine.
Hi, everyone. I'm pretty sure most of you probably know what I'm going to say, but I've written down a small thing I'd like to say. When you are on a district school board, you are looking out for the best interests of all the students in the district, and anytime the possibility of school closures arise, that is understandably a very emotional subject. It was an emotional subject when the original committee, of which I was a member, who created the ACSD charter, set the guidelines for how the possibility of school closures would transpire, and it's ultimately why the majority of the committee voted to create the article in the manner that it did. I never took the matter of school closures lightly when I was on the board, nor do I think any other board member did. But if there comes a time when that decision needs to be made, because it's been looked at carefully and deemed to be in the best interest of the students in this district, all the students, a board cannot be held hostage by any town because they vote against the closure of their school, not if you want to be an effective board. While I feel for Ripton and the situation they find themselves in, I would urge this board not to consider changing the charter to allow towns to make a decision that was voted to this board by the original charter when all the towns voted to approve that charter. So that's my feelings on that. And just as an aside, I'm hoping that you guys later, when you discuss this in more fully, from what I gathered in reading the materials, the state board has the power to, if Ripton decides it wants to rejoin, has the power to allow them to rejoin without a public vote from the towns, as we had to do when they left. So it sounds like normally that would happen, but that the state board is going to override that or something. So I'm hoping that will be discussed later, because I have some concerns about that as well. But thank you for listening to me, and nice to see you all.
Thanks, Lorraine. Any others' hands up? I don't see any.
Oh, Ruth just put hers.
Oh. Ruth.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I wasn't planning to say anything, but I will quickly. I think there's generally a big misunderstanding about what this discussion is about. Most of us who are trying to, as some would say, fight for our schools, it's really not ever just about our schools. It's about, and we're not saying that no school should ever be closed, but just that closing them isn't the goal. Keeping them open is the goal, if possible. So I think that's really important to understand, just broadly. And it's never just about one school. It's never been just about Ripton. Sorry about the screaming. It's never been just about Shoreham. We're all in this because we believe in community education as close to the families as possible. So just something to keep in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. All right. Not seeing any other hands online or in the room. Let's move on. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes of August 8th?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Brian.
Second.
Mary Hill, second. I just had I thought he was going to be here.
I did too.
Can you just tell me who made the motions, please?
Yep. So it was Brian made the motion and Mary Gill seconded.
Thank you.
Sorry, Mary Heather, I thought Heather was going to be here to assist in minute taking since you were on Zoom, but she isn't, so please break in if you have any questions or need clarification or something repeated, please.
Mary Heather, do you want me to write down who does motions? Would that be helpful?
Yeah, actually, that would be great, Suzanne. Thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table to approve the minutes of August 8th. Any questions, comments around the minutes?
Question, is Esther's last name Charles, is that correct?
Charlton. Charleston? Is it?
Yeah, Charleston, so that just needs to be corrected.
Okay. Did you hear that, Mary Heather?
Yes, I did. Thank you.
Great. Any other questions, comments on the minutes? All right, all those in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, the minutes are approved. On to the bills.
There was one set of bills read since last meeting. There were three payrolls, one for $213,979.44, another one for $25,815.79, and a third one for $3,822.57. And there were two out of the general fund, which was first one for $705,732.08, and a second one for $1,063.07. And Barbara and I read those bills and had no issues, so I make a motion to approve paying the bills.
And I'll second it.
Great. Any questions or comments on the bills? Being none, all those in favor of approving the bills, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great, let's pay the bills. Professional appointments in your board pack. You should have seen there's just a couple of them. Let's get a motion on the table to approve those, and then if there's any questions,
I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
Suzanne first and Steve seconded. Do you want to make any comment or any questions around these?
They're all three late hires for various reasons, and we're really fortunate to find some qualified and inspired folks to hire for these three positions.
How many school nurses does MUMS have?
One.
Did we see on the last one that there was a MUMS nurse?
There was, I don't think it was the last meeting, I think it was previously. We actually have two nurses we have one nurse position, and we have another position at MUMS that is a nurse, but she's not working as a regular ACSD nurse. She's with a student.
Okay.
That might be what you're...
I thought it said school nurse on the last appointment list.
Well, we did have a hire who was not able to accept the position.
Got it.
We had a kind of acceptance and then turnaround, never.
So not
Got
a
it.
resignation.
Never got to the
Yeah.
finish line.
Got
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
I had the same question.
Yeah.
Peter?
Just could you explain what's meant by PE/substitute?
So this was initially a .6 position, and due to the need for substitutes, last year we hired a couple long-term substitutes. We decided to provide more support at Shoreham with additional time for this person. So he's going to be working in a substitute role, and we'll also be providing additional supports and things like that.
Yes, I just want to commend the administration for the staff at Shoreham.
Oh, great.
Yes, I had the opportunity to meet many of them on Friday night. There was a barbecue, and
there were some backflips off the diving board.
Oh, I didn't stay the whole time. I delivered.
I wasn't sure if that was you or
No,
someone else.
I donated some sorbet for the event, right? Some cups of sorbet, and stayed for a little bit and got to meet everyone. And I have to say, I was so amazed, because I hadn't really been following as closely when I saw Maria and Liam, and thinking that they would be special educators at Shoreham. I just was giddy when I got home. My husband was like, wow, what did you drink? You know? So I am really hopeful, and you know, really the teams, just the collaboration and how they were together, the energy was just awesome. So I just want to thank you guys for the hard work, because I know it is, and I'm really, you know, hoping.
They're really excited.
Yeah, and I know they were.
Yeah.
It was hard for me to leave.
Yeah.
And I had to get home and pick blueberries and get ready for my market. So anyway, I complain a lot, right? But I wanted to.
I'm holding on to this one.
Okay, credit where credit is due.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's great.
All right, we have a motion on the table to approve the professional appointments as stated. If there's not any more questions, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? No. Great. Reported superintendent.
Great. I'll keep it fairly short. We are, since we met 2 weeks ago, we're continuing to gear up. If you ask anyone in this room that works for ACSD, how are you doing? They're going to say they're really busy, but there's also this kind of nervous excitement too that I think all of us feel. We met with some principals today to talk through some of the staffing challenges that we're having. I mentioned previously that our paraprofessional intensive needs positions have been harder to fill, so every principal is kind of working through an approach that works at their building. As you know, problem solving at MUMS is different than Mary Hogan, is different than Salisbury. So we're working with principals to help figure out how all those supports work in a way that best meets the needs of all students. We'll continue to be doing that as we get to the 31st and beyond. I think we're feeling, as we talked about today, we would love to have everything completely filled, and that would feel the best, but we do feel pretty grateful about where we are in relation to, I think, what we see across the state. And I think the challenges outside of education too. This is, as you all know, this is not something that's just being felt in education, but it's being felt in lots of other sectors too. There's, as Barb mentioned, there's a lot of positive energy. Some of it's from new teams being formed. Some of it, I think, in talking to a lot of people, they shared just how deeply satisfying this summer was in kind of getting back to things that matter to us and connecting with family and just like breathing clean air and all of those things. I'm feeling that in my interactions with all the folks that work at ACSD. So those of you that went to the Mom's Ice Cream Social, I heard amazing things about that. You were there as a parent, right?
And there's 20 new 7th graders at MUMS. I only know that because I have a 7th grader, and I just was astounded. I think about 10 are from within Vermont who've moved to this district. A few of those are Rochester, who are now doing school choice. And then 10 from all over. Wow. California, Arizona, New Jersey.
Cool.
So good energy. New staff was there, and my daughter was thrilled. It was a good way to start the year.
And so we start with staff on Wednesday, so we're going to be outside, and we looked at the weather today. It looks like the only good day of the week, so that is a huge boon. We're going to be, our focus, I think I mentioned this in our last meeting, is going to be on building community and wellness. And that is definitely, we've got a speaker here. Nargis is going to be speaking in front of a few people, right? How many? Do you know? What do you, how many do you think it is? All of the staff? How
Oh,
many do
don't
you
make
think
her
it is?
nervous.
Don't make her
Don't make her nervous. She's not nervous at all. She's
I'm
totally
good.
got this.
She's been seasoned.
Yeah.
I've got this.
And remember, you have no more than the rest of us.
So we have some great speakers. One's here. And we're going to be also, after I make a few comments and we celebrate our Teachers of the Year and our Whittemore Award, we're going to be playing games outside and just connecting and building community together, and then sharing a lunch together. You all are invited, and I think it starts at 8:30. Refreshments at like 8. Yeah. Bring something you're comfortable. It's supposed to be hot potentially, so we'll be outside on the football field, and then the game kind of time will be down. The activities will be down below.
And I read that the 8 to 8:30, it's inside.
Yeah, for the snacks.
Yeah, for the snacks.
Yeah. So a lot of energy, and we're ready to get started.
Sounds good. Does anybody have questions for Peter? No questions.
Okay.
All right.
So next thing on mine is the Q4 financial report. Logan is on Zoom. Chip, do you want to say anything before Logan takes over?
No, I don't know what Logan can say different than we said the other night.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to review the end of the year, at least briefly, to know where we come out and why we've come out that way. And I'll leave it up to Logan to say that.
Great. Logan, it's all you.
Thanks, and I have to apologize for not being there in person. My wife is traveling, so I'm at home, and I should try to keep this a little bit brief because I'll have a fair amount of background noise. But as he discussed this last meeting, the numbers came in almost exactly to what they were forecasted after quarter three. Quarter three, it was a little over 1.1 million estimated fund balance. And, this fourth quarter report is just under 1.1 million, so almost exactly as came out in Q3.
Great. Any questions for Logan?
Can I make one comment then?
Yes.
If he's not going to answer those. If you look on the attachment that we had with the little graph at the bottom, the two major reasons for the 1.1 almost fund balance positively is that we did not spend $1,017,000 on student instruction because we had less staff and thus less benefits to pay for. And we did not spend, and we had $520,000 because of less staff for special education. So those, it wasn't that we didn't spend, that we didn't want to spend the money, but we did not have the staff to pay to fill those positions which it had been budgeted for. Now, obviously, the other side of it, there's a $232,000 facilities number and a $69,000 transportation number, which worked the other way. But just so you know why we come out ahead on things, because that's where we want to come out ahead. But on the other side, there's usually good reasons why we come out either behind or ahead. Hopefully, in my time, we've always come out ahead. So that's, I think, good, because that means we budgeted well. We just didn't spend it, nor could we, because we didn't have the people that we could hire to spend it on. So,
question: will there be an opportunity to offer suggestions as to how to spend that money that's in surplus at this point?
well,
You've already spent it?
No, we haven't. This is the Q4 report, so this money will come forward in this next budget cycle,
Okay.
and we'll have an unaudited number that may shift slightly from this, and the same thing we did this past year when we talked about, prior to your arrival, of course, right? We talked about the kitchen at MUHS.
All right.
So
Then we elect, because this goes in, we elect to put it into a fund, and then the board decides how to utilize it. Either to turn it back into the budget as a revenue, or to utilize it for, in most cases, it's for things like kitchen, which we did.
yeah, it usually goes into a capital reserve just to keep.
It's a good opportunity to get something like that, okay.
Yep.
Mary Heather, that's great. Mary Heather? Thank you.
Yeah, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, yeah.
Yep.
Okay, I guess the question I have about that, particularly around, so we saved money because there were staff and benefits that were not paid because those positions were not filled. I guess I'm wondering if we can get a sense of whether some of those tasks were contracted out, and how those needs were met, because obviously these were things that the administration had budgeted for because the need was, there was a perceived need there, and then those things weren't spent. I'm just wondering, how those needs were met, and how we paid for those tasks. Is my question making sense?
I think it makes sense. The response would be pretty, it's pretty nuanced in terms of all of the different positions that we weren't able to fill. That was also combined with having ESSER funds to spend. So in some ways, we ESSER funded some positions that sustained and paid not out of this budget, right, but additional grant funds. Last year, with positions that were not filled, and there were a number of them that weren't filled, people were doing double duty. So, a substitute would come in and do their substituting and add something else because we couldn't get someone to come in for someone else. So it was basically everyone kind of doing more than they're accustomed to fill in where the need was. I wouldn't say there's one, in my mind right now, just off the top of my head, there's not one position that when I think back to last year, okay, like these numbers of positions weren't filled and this is how we filled them. It was kind of across the board. I think if we looked at what we allocated in the FY22 budget and what we had was really different. And I think, as I said, I think the ESSER funding makes this a little bit different than it would have been, because a lot of positions that would have been general funded were ESSER funded, even though they were additional positions, right? They weren't positions that had lived in our budget previously. It still made it so that we had more revenue coming out of this past year than we would have, because we would have been having to use the general fund for some of these positions that were ESSER funded. Does that help at all?
It does. I guess I just want to sort of highlight how we look at this money and these positions moving forward, whether they're things that we are expecting to see in upcoming budgets, or whether these were just kind of extras that were never filled. I just want to make sure the board has an understanding of what this represents moving forward.
Yeah, every year there are positions that we budget for that we haven't been able to fill, and some of those positions we do contract for. Some of those are like speech language and other things like that. I would say that's not substantially where positions aren't filled, or there's not a lot of contracting that we do significantly with like $1 million revenue here. But every year in the budget cycle, we go back through and look at all of our positions, and we're budgeting for the people that are currently in a position, or sometimes we say we're going to add a X position, and if we can't fill that position the following year, we probably wouldn't put it back into the budget. So our budget process does have us vetting all of our staffing and determining what we're going to post for. But like right now, as an example, we're looking for 6 custodians who aren't getting, they're budgeted, but we're not paying for them. So we're paying in overtime for some of the other custodians to help fill the void. Those are the kinds of things that we're confronting right now. And they're positions that we wouldn't take out of the budget because we need them. We're just waiting for more staff to come back, essentially.
Peter?
Just to follow up on that, and then I have a question, but also this is sort of the end look at FY22. We've already budgeted and approved a budget for FY23. So when you go to look at FY24, you're actually looking back at FY23 probably more so than FY22.
Sure. Yep. Yep.
And my question is, I'm just looking at the pie chart down below, and that maybe a little more explanation. I'm just curious that the health insurance portion of the pie is so big and the wages and salaries portion is smaller. I'm not sure I'm reading it right or understand what the topic is.
Logan, do you have?
Oh, it's activity surplus.
It's a
There's some expenses in surplus.
Logan, did you hear that question?
All right, I thought I heard someone else talking. Yeah, this came up at our finance committee meeting, and Chip asked the same question. It's sorry. It has to do with the fact that we similar to the HRA reserve conversation, where we were unsure the usage of that HRA. We didn't have a lot of history. So going forward, we shouldn't see as big of a disparity between the health insurance and wages. But there was a contingency based on lack of sureness. We weren't sure exactly how much those health insurance costs were going to be, so we factored in a cushion.
And so when someone's hired and like I elect to not take it versus taking a family plan, that's $25,000. So that's how, I mean, normally, right, wages are much more than the insurance cost. But in terms of what we budgeted, we put more into health insurance than we needed, so there was more of a surplus there. It's not that the ratio doesn't.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
That makes more sense.
And this is also aligned with the fact that we eliminated the HRA reserve, because now there's enough history there that we have some clarity that that contingency is no longer necessary.
Thank you.
Is there another question? Mary?
Mary Heather's question triggered something in my mind. When you contract out for speech and language or special education, what was the outcome of those services? I mean, do you feel that they provided the service that the kids needed?
I mean, there are times when those services can be better in some ways in terms of flexibility if they're virtual, like Presence Learning, which is a company we use for speech language. Sometimes, like with special ed, we will go to a consultant if we can't hire a position. So they're bringing certain expertise that could be more helpful. Whether it's better than having our own employee, I'm not sure I would say that. But sometimes it's needing staffing and needing to go somewhere to get it. And so we're kind of forced to look at consultants. I think a lot of times, I mean, some of our positions, this is like years in the making, right? Like school psychologists are so hard to hire. And everybody has this issue with hiring school psychologists. So we often, our school psychologists will be taking on a couple different things. And Nicole, do you have anything to add in terms of some of those positions? Because they mostly fall in kind of your realm.
Yeah. So the speech language pathologists worked really hard at this year to come together as a team. I think 5 times, could have been 4 over the year, to figure out what was working, what wasn't, what we were going to do differently this year. I would say nobody wants to have remote SLP, but we're trying to figure out how to leverage it so that we're using it in a place, so that SLPs in person are in the places they need to be, based on their expertise. So I think that feels that part of it feels good. The school psychologist is a real, true, difficult phenomenon. So this year we hired a special educator who can do assessments, and the state allows you to have that as an option, but it means that we have less opportunities. We have to be very thoughtful about where our school psychologist does her testing versus having a broader array of tools in our bucket. So it's a difficult question. I think overall, staff would say that we need the staff we need. And it's hard to replace them with other services.
So not optimal at all.
That would be a really good summary of what I'm saying.
But not marginal.
Not marginal.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
But can be, I mean, better than not having any
Right,
support.
obviously.
And, you know, like with our SLPs, we'd much rather have our own SLPs
Right.
and our own
Person to
fully
person.
staffed team. But when we can't have that fully staffed team, we're taking some of the pressure off of our SLPs who, you know, whose caseload goes from like this, like the normal caseload, it starts to get like a little bit heavier to handle. So that's where the consultant can help to make it more manageable too.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, and this is more looking at the revenue that we didn't get that we expected, which wasn't a whole lot, but it was fewer tuition students and lower ed, special ed reimbursement. So what's your sense this year? Are we doing good with tuition students? It sounded like mums might be, yeah.
I feel like there was a phenomenon last year where a lot of families decided to do something different. So some, I think homeschooling increased sharply. People looked at alternative kinds of things to do. So I think we're going to see, I'm hoping to see a shift back, and I would think that our numbers would be increasing this year. Yeah.
Good, yeah. That's what I would hope and guess, but yeah. Look forward to seeing those numbers when we publish in what, October, I think?
Yeah.
Any other questions around the financial report summary? Thank you, Logan. On to report of the board and board retreat, which I'm actually going to hand over to Peter.
Great. So I met last week, maybe 2 weeks ago, with Emma Mulvaney-Stanek, who has been our consultant, working with our advisory committee, who has, as you know, did all the work last year in preparing, kind of like bringing voices together and collecting data to share recommendations with the board at the retreat, which is at our next meeting. Yes.
Can you step one step back? We're talking, this consultant was for the equity study, or is this something completely that I don't know what we're talking about?
Could be both. It's about the consultant that's had worked with the advisory committee and is going to work with the board.
Oh. So it is both. You're right, I don't know about that, and it is the person that's been working on the equity study.
Yeah.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah. So she has also been working closely with Emily Blistein, who is our director of communications, and we met last week to just kind of talk about what the retreat, the board retreat, could look like in terms of bringing those recommendations forward. There are going to be some advice. I think most of the committee will be at the meeting too, so there'll be a chance to kind of talk with the committee. We're also going to be, Emma's going to kind of take the board through the entire arc of the process of getting to the recommendations, and we'll be kind of unpacking those with the board and talking about the process over the next probably 2 months of the board working on vision, mission, setting some foundational goals as we did the last time, and a theory of action, which is kind of statements about how the board is going to operate to support the kind of goals that the board lays out as, like, these are the things that we want to see happen in ACSD. So I think it's going to be a great retreat. I think I think we hit the timing perfectly, honestly, in terms of where we are coming I'm going to say coming out of the pandemic, even though I know people are afraid to say that. I think in terms of where we are, I think that the timing is really, really good for our community to be looking ahead and starting to build a plan of where do we go from here, and having equity at the front end of that.
Mary Heather.
Peter, can you, I'm just curious about how we can be best prepared to be really productive during this board retreat. I'm assuming that the goal is for us to try to get some foundational goals and plan of action nailed down. What kind of materials can we expect prior to the meeting so that we can show up prepared and ready to work?
So we're meeting again this week, and are going to kind of finalize that whole packet of information. So the plan is to share an overview of kind of what is going to happen both at the retreat and the timeline for where we're going to kind of how we're going to do the work over the next few months, with the recommendations and all the other kind of pertinent data that the board might need to read and kind of digest before the meeting. So it would be hard to do all of this in the meeting, so we will be sharing some of that information and kind of organize it and simplify it in a way that it's accessible.
Can I ask one other question? The retreat is the retreat. It's not, it does replace our normal board meeting for that time. Will any other business be done at that meeting?
We do have, we weren't able to squeeze it onto this agenda, but we do have the MUHS cafeteria. There's a contract issue that for some reason has to come back to the board, which I learned about, I think, on Thursday. So that's something that we may just like squeeze at the front end or something. It'd probably take 5 minutes.
Okay, well, just because it was at the same day and expanded time of our normal meeting.
Yeah.
Any other questions? We're in the retreat.
Yeah, so the focus is mainly going to be to unpack the equity and really dedicate our time for that very important topic.
Yeah.
Yep, okay.
And to understand the board's role moving forward in establishing that high vision.
Wow,
Yeah.
I was just looking at. We're getting our timing done. We're like, okay, this seems important. We want to make sure it's on our calendars.
Yes. So it's next. It's our
Calendar
next meeting, and it's November 1. And it's
November 12th at 3 p.m. I have it on my calendar. That's
And that's here?
from the board calendar.
here.
Yep.
It's not in board pack yet.
It's on the board calendar.
Yep.
Like use the ACSD calendar that's
Right,
connected
but
here.
I'm in board pack right now, so that's what.
Could I suggest, Peter, that that we have a more detailed, if you scroll on the months, I know board meetings at times are a little fluid, but generally they're not, okay? That would be helpful if those, even if we don't have anything else, except we know that it's the second and fourth Monday, but it's nice to see it on the next month when you scroll it, okay?
You're talking
Because then I
about
can
board
put
pack?
it on board pack. It's not in there now. Everything ends in August, okay?
Right, so that's what I'm trying to say. If you have an ACSD calendar connected to your ACSD email,
Right.
I feed that into my personal email, so then it's automatically blocking time for me, so you don't have to like manually add them in. You can feed this Google Calendar.
Yeah, I know that, but it's still the case when I'm looking at,
That's easy.
Sharon did that. It's not a criticism of Heather, but it's just to sort of, I think it's helpful having that general view of things. So I know it's simplistic, but I don't look at my phone for every minute that I need to go somewhere.
I'm just saying, I write mine in my paper calendar.
I do too. I buy one every year, and it ain't gonna change me, guys.
Bravo. I use both, so.
For years I did electronic, but I lost it when my computer died, so.
I met someone today who came in with a piece of paper and then had a list, just a single, took a piece of paper like this and had a list, and it just looked so satisfying, like carrying this thing around. It's just right there,
Right.
like this
Until you lose it.
crumbling
Exactly.
piece of paper.
Oh, I can't, yeah. My back pocket always has a list.
Yeah.
I can't just check my email and go, oh, fun. I don't.
All right, any other questions regarding the retreat?
Is there there'll be dinner, right? So that
Yeah,
we
that'll be
shouldn't
food.
have to worry about bringing our own?
Yep,
Okay.
there will be dinner.
Yep.
Just little things, I'm like,
Well, I just needed to know if I need to go to Nooney's or not.
All right, so on to report of the board number 2, discussion of the Ripton State Board update. I hope you all had a chance to review the State Board of Education's opinion on Ripton's readiness to manage their own school. It was attached in our board pack, so I assume you've all read it. The State Board opinion is that Ripton has not been able to prove that they have a plan to effectively meet the educational needs of students in Ripton for a number of different reasons. This leaves Ripton 2 choices: to go forward in trying to set up a school and finding or creating a district to work within, despite the State Board's opinion, or requesting the State Board reverse its declaration of Ripton as a separate district. It's been reported that the Ripton School Board has warned a town vote for the 21st of September. Like many of you, I followed the process in the news. I've been contacted by the IDND and the VPR, but no one from the Ripton School Board or anyone representing them has contacted me as board chair about anything. So luckily, we have Steve Cash. I must say that your timing was just perfect. You couldn't have done that better. In the room, Steve is the chair of the Ripton School Board, and I was hoping that maybe you could speak to sort of where you all are in the process about the vote going forward, and just sort of give us an update on the Ripton School Board.
Yeah, I'm happy to stand up, go into the chair, or whatever works best.
However you're most comfortable about that.
You can just go over here.
Sit next to me. All right. First, just to kind of correct the record, there is a vote to be held in Ripton on the 21st of September. We are having the informational meeting that is required in H727. On that day, we will be holding a vote as well, a floor vote, to give the Ripton School Board the authority to borrow money. So that is the vote.
Okay.
That will be held
On the
September
21st. Got it.
I know there's a lot of votes, and that one's a little different because it's a floor vote, not an Australian
okay.
ballot
Thank
vote.
you for correcting.
We are planning to warn a vote on the 29th of September regarding the issue of re-entering ACSD. Right now, we are trying to determine exactly what that warning will look like. One of the big questions we are getting from our voters is, what does a return to ACSD mean? Does it mean we go back under the charter that was in existence previously? Is there any conversation about some changes to be had? That's one of the biggest questions that we're getting right now. And so part of me being here tonight is to try and answer that question so I know what to tell voters. In our status report review, which is also the preparedness review, we needed to submit according to 727 that status report, as I let you all know about. The State Board of Ed did a preparedness review, as you mentioned, and throughout that was a series. It was either 8 meetings or 6 meetings that there's some testimony on Ripton's behalf, there's some testimony on the State Board of Education's behalf, and then just kind of a conversation about the review determination. Yeah, I guess I can share as much about that process. I don't know what you want to hear from me. I don't want to go on. It's been a long, challenging process
for sure. But I don't want to take up your time with all of that. So I guess I'll stop there and see if there's more questions. I can share what that preparedness review was like or whatever you need to do. I don't want to take up your time.
Well, we're here to discuss it, so we appreciate you giving us your time. I think I'll open it if anybody has questions for Steve, sort of clarifying questions about the report or the process, or the opinion, I should say, or the process, or sort of questions about sort of Ripton School Board's next steps or anything along those lines.
I just have one statement. I don't know if the board has read the entire 16-page deal, so I would have missed, I read the executive summary, and then for some reason I didn't read the second part of it, okay, which is a good chronology, factual chronology of what happened from the beginning. So for any board members that haven't had it, it's sort of a document that sort of puts us at this point in time. I mean, there are some statements in there, obviously, by State School Board Chairman Olson and others that are, I think, important also. But I just think it is a state document, and rather than just the executive summary, I'd make sure you read the whole thing because I think it's helpful.
Great. Peter?
Steve, just a question about, will the school board sort of signal to the voters sort of their preference to which way the vote should go?
At this point, we are trying to be as open as possible and say to voters, this is the options. That's pretty tricky in a situation like this that's moving forward because there's some amount of forecasting that goes into that. So I think our stance has been to be open with the voters and be transparent. That's just hard when there's some other potential options and things that might occur. And it's almost, it puts myself to a certain extent in situations where I have to almost forecast based on likelihood. And I have there's a lot of questions, you know. There's still in Ripton some sentiment that the State Board of Ed initially should have assigned us to an SU, and that our assignment as an SD was inappropriate based on size. And so that whole kind of thought process is still out there. And, you know, there's questions of if we vote not to re-enter ACSD, does the ACSD or does the State Board of Ed have to assign us? And I'll be perfectly plain with everyone. Our legal counsel is telling us if we did not go back to ACSD, it's his opinion that we would be under 261 and the State Board of Ed would need to assign us to an SU. That's very different than if you read the Addison Independent and some of the statements that the chair on the SBE has made. So that's kind of the gulf we're navigating, and I'm trying to explain to townspeople where it's at without casting that influence. I just don't think that's necessarily my role. The town voted to withdraw based on conditions, and that's what we're hoping is that the town will have their say.
Yeah, I thought I'd take this opportunity because Lorraine did ask, make a question about Ripton being able to come back without having a town vote kind of thing, right? And that's part of H727 that allowed that off-ramp. So that, for Lorraine's benefit, is really part of, and Peter obviously can talk more about that, is part of the new act that has been enacted that enables Ripton specifically, to make that choice as a town.
If I could add, on that point, my understanding is that's a one-time situation.
Yes.
And so that off-ramp is in there.
For you guys.
And that's it. And
Yeah.
that's something that is not available in other situations.
Right.
And so that's something else I'm encouraging people to think about, is that at that point there will then be, if Ripton was to be interested in coming back to ACSD, 6 other votes that would need to happen, and I think that's part of just the calculation of all of this as we try to figure out Ripton's space and a solution for us. So I don't quite want to use the broad solution.
Right.
You all.
Mary Heather.
Thanks. Steve, I'm wondering, has the Ripton School Board discussed, have you all drafted a warning for the return to ACSD vote? Is this something that you are sort of pausing for to determine whether or not that warning to return to ACSD would have conditions on it? Can you clarify exactly what the board is thinking on that?
Yeah, so we've started drafting kind of 2 potential warnings. One is just up or down vote, does Ripton return to ACSD, yes or no? And then there's another potential warning of does Ripton return to ACSD with a condition that ACSD agrees to not close, repurpose, or some other language an elementary school without a vote of the town. And so that's the very similar language to what we first approached this board. I don't know if it was 2018 or 19, but a while ago. So that's kind of where that sits with those 2 warnings. And I have no idea if there's an appetite in ACSD to talk about charter changes. Last time, multiple times when I've been here before, there has been no appetite for that. I don't know if that's where this still stands today. I would definitely be interested to hear if there's any insight or thoughts or anything on that.
Well, and I guess to follow up, certainly the Addison Independent kind of indicated, or at least the quote attributed to Ripton's attorney indicated that ACSD had been contacted regarding a charter change. I'm just wondering, Peter, Victoria, has that actually happened?
Yeah,
or is that just something that's been reported? I'm just wondering where we are in that communication specifically.
Right. I was actually surprised by that quote because I personally have not been contacted, and it wasn't until after that article appeared that the Ripton School Board attorney reached out to an attorney in the same practice as the district's attorney, but not the district's attorney. And so there was several days, I think Peter might be able to speak more coherently to it, where there was some confusion, and we have not heard from our attorney.
No, I mean, I was contacted by a different attorney. The wrong attorney was contacted, essentially. And so then I talked to our attorney who worked on all of the, the charter development and has been our kind of ACSD attorney in terms of working on governance back from 2015, 2016 on. And I contacted him on Wednesday. He contacted me late on Friday and said, check in with me today, Monday. And since we're having this meeting, I figured I would follow up tomorrow.
So we don't have any formal request, would be the
right, yeah.
Okay,
summation.
And then I guess I'm trying to get a sense. So, Steve, your board is trying to get a warning finalized by a certain date, and that date is when?
To get that in a newspaper, it needs to be, the vote is going to be held September 29th, and then to get that in the paper by the appropriate day next week, that warning will need to be dialed in by tomorrow.
So by tomorrow, you would need to know whether or not this warning would have conditional language.
Yeah, and that's part of it. This whole thing has been an amazingly fast time frame to put together that status report to get the review done.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a reason the State Board of Ed had 8 meetings within the space of 2 weeks, is because this is a tight time frame. And so that's what we're working with. And just to clarify, on the attorney, our attorney, Mark Ottinger, it's my understanding from him, he reached out to Chris Leopold. Chris Leopold, it sounded like, was not working with the district or was not the appropriate attorney. He then reached out to Pietro Lynn. It sounded like Pietro was not the appropriate person. Our attorney has had conversations with Sean Toohey at this point. So I'm hoping that is the individual that is representing ACSD. If there is someone else who our attorney should be speaking with, that would be very good to know.
Yeah, no, it was Chris Leopold was the person that we had been working with. And I don't know where he had confusion, because there was some conversation. I mean, this is probably for outside of this meeting, but I think there was some conversation between the state board and the Ripton attorney, and then a communication happened to Chris from the state board. And anyway, it sounds like there was some miscommunication.
So at this point, Chris Leopold is the appropriate person who is representing ACSD. I'm kind of baffled right now, but that's all right. I'll suspend my disbelief at this moment.
So
I just want to follow up. I'm sorry about. I just want to follow up on the sort of logistics of this, just for our board's purpose. So, I guess I'm wondering if we have not had a conversation as a board with our attorney about this request. How do we? Is it possible, I guess, even for our board to, I mean, we haven't warned anything about taking an action. We could probably have a discussion informally, but I'm not sure that we, even with the best of intentions, have the ability to meet the deadline that you all would need to have a conditional warning. Even if it was something that we were all like, I guess I'm not sure that's even possible given the time frame we're in, like right now tonight.
Yes. So one question we did have was, would the voters need to make that charter change, or would the board? That was a big question, and what would the timeframes have to be for that warning? We are operating off the old Chris Leopold memo when the petition wasn't initially warned, that said that was in the board's purview to make that decision. So that's kind of one question as far as the mechanics of how would it work. Obviously, you can get a different legal opinion, so you may hear differently at some point. But one word that we've currently talked about in our warning to try and navigate some of the timeframes is the ACSD agrees to make a charter change, but has not made that charter change per se. So the vote would be contingent on a future situation. It doesn't say, by such and such date, this will have happened. That's pretty much the best way I think that we've been able to.
But then, Steve, what happens if Ripton voters say, yeah, that sounds good, and then the ACSD doesn't do that? Where would that leave Ripton?
Then at that point, I think that's a great question, but I suspect my understanding of all of this is we either work this out locally or Ripton's going back before the State Board of Education. And it seems like, according to Oliver Olson, they don't seem too interested in assigning us to an SU, but it seems the statute indicates differently. So I think that would be the outcome. If we had a vote, the conditions weren't met, then I think that wouldn't hold, and it would be treated as a no vote at that point, I think.
Gotcha.
Okay,
sorry. I'm sorry, but I want to make sure I understand like the sort of process and sort of flow chart, if you will, and to see how our group can best align with the time frame that you guys are working under. So this is helpful. I appreciate it. Sorry. Anybody else go forward and ask questions? I'll be quiet.
Well, part of it was what what you were saying, Mary Heather, too, but it seemed to me that to have a vote that's a contingent upon a non-set contingent, I don't know why, I don't know how that would work if I was voting on that. I think, you would have to assume if you vote yes or no on a simple one that, well, you have an answer. And those people that vote either way may have another step down that they want to look toward, being the change in the charter, which would go back to what we have argued about for a long time. But I think at this point, I agree, this is no time frame. I didn't realize the time frame was so short, or that we didn't even have, that Ripton School Board hadn't had an absolute motion yet that would, or statement, that would be voted on. I understand it's all close, and I sympathize with having to do it all that way, but I don't know where we then come into this. I don't know.
Yep. Go ahead.
Yeah, it is extremely tight. I mean, what day was that report issued?
Friday.
Yes. I mean,
Not last Friday.
The 12th.
yeah, so it's
12th.
we're trying to turn stuff around here pretty quick. And I think after being at multiple State Board of Ed meetings, one of the clear takeaways to me is that the SBE, and this is more my personal feeling, it seems like this is a pretty challenging space for them to work at such a high level in such kind of a zeroed-in situation. They just, as Oliver Olson, I think, said in the last meeting, we don't have the tools in our toolbox. And so there is frustration, and I get it, and I think if there is a local solution to this that should be included in that off-ramp possibility, I think the Ripton board would certainly be interested in doing that. If there is not one, then it's just a yes/no vote, and I think our town decides yes or no based on that situation without that kind of local potential included in any way.
I think when I think about what this board needs to do, I want to put the timeline aside, because I don't think that we're going to come to any conclusion before tomorrow. But I think the question for the board is whether or not we're willing to discuss changing articles around the school closure question, whether there's a middle ground of some sort. I think that there have been, obviously this has been an issue that has sort of stood in the way of progress, I feel like. And there's sort of two entrenched camps. This board has stated that, a board that has fiduciary responsibility for the district, that to give up the ability to decide where to invest our limited resources is a big deal. Ripton has stated that they want individual towns to have the ability to close a school. I wonder, and my question for the board is whether there's a middle ground somewhere that could appease both sides. So I think if we put the timeline aside and perhaps discuss whether or not there is appetite to move forward discussing that question, that might be sort of the best we can do tonight.
Question.
Brian.
It may sound ridiculous, but has Ripton actually left the district legally? Has it left the district legally?
Yeah.
So, all right, if it has, in this charter, which I've never seen, is there any verbiage in the charter which would allow it to reaccept a school that has left? Is there anything in
Page
this?
727.
Yep.
Yes, there is.
Yes.
And have you looked at that language to see how you could come back in if you choose to?
So, my understanding is Ripton has left the district effective July 1st, 2023.
So it has left the district.
Currently,
But this is not 2023, this is 2022.
Right.
So to answer my question is, you have not legally left the district. You are still part of this district
Right,
until
this-
Until,
2023.
right, they
Right.
have permission to leave, or
Right, but
they've,
it's not legally complete.
I'd honestly defer for a legal opinion on that one. I mean, that's really
Well,
kind of,
my point is that if you haven't left the district, then you're still in the district. Yes.
My reading of the board's
Wait,
decision is...
let the chair follow.
yes.
You can't talk.
I think that those are sort of nuances that were, that everybody has an understanding that Ripton has requested to leave the district, and that the the legal moment of severance will be July of 2023. So they are,
My
yes,
point
right
is-
now, still within our district.
Yes.
The legislature has given them the opportunity to rescind their request to leave the district if the voters.
So the other thing, Brian, is that the original motion was to leave the district, I believe, July 1, 2022, which was then they were given an extension to try to come up with all the work that the State Board of Education asked for. The State Board gave them that extra year, but it was originally July 1, 2022.
Okay, so your view at this point then is that they are legally out of the district?
They're legally going to be out of the district.
That doesn't answer my question, because what I'm saying is that if you're still in the district, you may have some advantages to maybe negotiate with the district that you're in, as opposed to if you are outside it. That's my point.
Okay. Thank you. Barb?
Yes. I would really support trying to work together on a common, maybe some common ground, because this isn't just Ripton. I know town like Shoreham, they were this close to withdrawing themselves, and had very much advocated for, and at our town meeting voted that they wanted this ability to weigh in on a decision to close their school. And maybe there is, some common ground. I think I've been thinking about this a lot, right? And we tend to think, well, these rural buffoon towns, they're going to keep their school open regardless. I don't believe that's true. My select board in Shoreham, they're very fiscally responsible. And we balance our budget, we do a very good job. It is a pretty large budget. And they're very good, at doing that. And they're also very concerned about the taxpayers within their constituency as well. I think what has been missing is a dialogue with towns, and also addressing questions that they've had, and really being transparent on, and I've said this before, what is the criterion by which we'll decide to close schools, and how much, what's the accountability if we say as a board we're going to save X amount of dollars, that we really did save X amount of dollars? Because I've read lots of articles across, the last couple of years where districts have closed schools, and it really hasn't saved them anything by the time they, deal with the busing and other issues associated with it. I've also read that kids that are in rural communities, especially underserved areas like, some of our towns do better closer to home too. So there's a lot of things that people worry about that. So I would be very open as a board member to have a dialogue where we could come up with something that gives a little bit of assurance and protection that we are taking these things into account and we are going to be accountable for the results, that kind of thing.
On that point, one suggestion that we did here in this process was, would you approach ACSD and ask just for school closure protections for Ripton? And the person who gave us that advice, I think, thought it was a good suggestion. We as a board said categorically no. We said we don't believe, yes, maybe it's a narrower ask in some ways, and it seems like a workable solution, but we very quickly said, we're not even going to bring that up. It's not fair to the rest of the district. It just, throughout this, I can't, Ripton has been described in so many ways throughout this whole process, which are kind of baffling because some of the ways that we've been described, I'm like, oh, yeah, I have no idea where that comes from. But we do not want to be, have that perception encouraged that, we are somehow different or this or that. We're a dedicated town with a lot of heart who really value our school. We don't get it all right. And so we just thought it was important to come back and request it for everyone, otherwise not request it. I think that was pretty much the decision that I made with my fellow board members of we either ask for everybody or we just go back to the State Board of Ed, pursue SU assignment at that point. So just to clarify in terms of Shoreham, and if people are like, why doesn't Ripton just ask for Ripton, that's the reason.
Peter.
I've obviously thought a lot about this. I've thought a lot about this since 2018 or 2017 or whenever the petition came forward. That was a time when the district and the charter were both relatively new. They had not, it was sort of on the heels of frankly overwhelming voter support for the charter. And the board at that time was unanimous in its decision to not make a dramatic change to the charter so soon after it had been ratified by all the towns in the community. And the board at that time was unified in its decision to really address the high per pupil spending we were encountering and the declining enrollment. That was 4 or 5 years ago. Fast forward to 2022, and all we have been through, we're so many years beyond that at this point, and we still haven't even, proposed closing a school. Yet despite that, this continues to be a very strong, simmering, divisive issue that has now also become very political. And I am personally very concerned about this issue kind of hanging out there and the impact it's having on the board and a future board. As it's become more politicized, I think people who have thought about being on this board have said, well, it's things are simmering out there, it's too hot, and and I don't want to go up against a very well-funded candidate. And I think that those, I think a lot about the board of the future. We change over 3 to 4 people every year. And with this issue sort of continuing to be, I thought it was much more on the back burner since we really haven't done anything with it. But what I'm hearing is that it continues to simmer. I think obviously Ripton is an example of that. So I find myself, sort of for the sake of having a board, having people interested in being on this board, more interested in, now so many years along, taking the temperature down. And I think that I find myself more open to having a conversation about it at the board level. timing-wise, it's never going to meet, the wheels of democracy on a board that meets twice a month move really slow. So I don't see, the conversation resulting in something in time to give you the definitive answers that you or your voters may want. When you figure, our next meeting is a retreat that's already fully booked. I think that probably the best way for this board to approach this is to look at what other charters have in it. Some have the single town vote, some have all towns vote, some have percentages of board members, percentages of towns. But I think it'd be good for this board to look at, if we're going to take it up, to look at different examples. And I would just sort of offer this caution. It may not be either a single town veto or nothing. It might be something in the middle that may not meet the language of a condition that you put in language. And I just further complicate things of what you already have is a very complicated situation. So anyway, as somebody who sort of has been through this all along and has somewhat evolved, my thinking has evolved along it, I just wanted to offer that.
Thank you. Could I make a motion? Sure.
Right?
Mary Heather and then Suzanne. How about that?
Go ahead, Mary Heather.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Well, first of all, I guess I just want to thank Peter and Barb and Chip for offering thoughtful conversation about this. I think, I've not been shy about expressing my opinion regarding our board's and our district's fiduciary responsibility and how important it is that we retain decision-making authority for matters concerning our budget and distribution of our limited resources. But I also, and I do think that, having these sort of small school protections in our charter isn't, I guess I don't subscribe to the idea that it's going to, solve the rifts or, make this issue go away. I think it will absolutely still continue to be a sort of divisive matter because everybody's passionate about their schools, and that's one of the reasons I'm on the board, is because I'm passionate about our schools, and that's the kind of energy we all want. And other districts whose member towns have these protections are still really grappling with this issue. I wonder if, I guess one of the things that I've been thinking of is a little bit like what Peter Conlon was just alluding to, that perhaps there is some kind of solution that allows the ACSD continued decision-making over that, but that it's not just the board. And I guess I'm wondering if this board might have the interest in considering something like, like a town vote, meaning, I'm sorry, not a town vote, but a district-wide vote, where, the decision about whether or not to close a school in our district is something that is taken to the voters of all of our member towns and presented like that. And, the district has accountability to all of its member voters. And then it's not necessarily just a board decision with a majority or, I guess I'm just wondering if that is a potential solution that would make Ripton feel more comfortable that there's, some real accountability on the district's part to, present the information, educate voters, and have voters decide. I guess, we do that every year with our budget. We take, and it seems to me that a school closure or a big facility decision, if we're going to bond on a big facility repair or upgrade, that would also go to our district voters. It seems reasonable to consider, having a school closure decision also contemplated by our full voters. I do feel very, very uncomfortable, vehemently so, against any one town having veto authority over a matter that is the full district's fiduciary responsibility. I don't know how we can ever come to a resolution when we have, a decision-making structure like that. I can't even conceptualize how that would even work. So I'm open to the discussion with real strong guardrails to preserve the district as a decision-making authority, because it in essence has the fiduciary responsibility.
Thank you, Mary Heather. Did you want to?
Okay, well.
All I wanted to do was just to move this conversation to a committee and have the committee do the research so that we know what's out there as far as charters and how other different districts handle the fiduciary responsibilities, and then they can be the ones that go out and do all the research and then bring it back, and then we can have a better conversation. We obviously are not going to sit around this table tonight and do research, but if we were to give it to a small group of people that were interested in it, then they could bring forward what they find across the state. It's just a suggestion.
So an ad hoc committee of sorts.
Parliamentary procedure comment.
Please.
I think that the chair doesn't necessarily require a motion. That the chair has the power to appoint a committee.
Okay.
The chair so chooses.
Okay. So why don't we, do you all,
Although, per se, if the board generally consensus-wise agrees with that, it certainly gives the chair
right.
more strength in doing that, okay?
Right.
We're not
So
voting this
I
out.
guess I posed the question as to would everybody be enthusiastic about me appointing an ad hoc committee to look at the articles of agreement around school closure, the piece of the articles that covers school closure.
Yeah, I think the devil's always in the details. And it would really matter who was on that committee.
Right. My next state would be,
Yeah.
if everybody is enthusiastic about that, if you were
I think
then
we have to have
interested, could you
representation
please
kind of,
let me
from
know? But let's
different
get-
viewpoints.
Yes, of course.
You're both talking at the same time.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying. She's saying that the committee would need to represent different viewpoints.
Yes.
If this group would support an ad hoc committee, I would ask those interested to please contact me before Wednesday. And we could go from there. How do people feel?
I support it, and I think it'd just be good to further define what the committee's job would be, which what I'm hearing would be to really just go out and collect examples of language from other articles of agreement or propose their own, but really to provide this board with a menu of options to discuss, which makes me not all that concerned about who's on it, because the idea is to present a broad range of options, which is a pretty objective.
It may be helpful if a representative group is formed for that group to do a little bit of work as opposed to just bringing, 15 different examples, but to try to hone in a little bit too, just to
You have to bring a recommendation.
support a stronger conversation here.
Steve?
If you do that with a subcommittee of the board, I think it's very important that we understand as a board that we are doing that, and that group will be presenting a set of options. There are people in this room who have mischaracterized when that has been done in the past. When we looked at different school models, that was used to talk about how we were not being transparent when there were models out there that we did not consider. And it was used as ammunition to attack this board. And I think that we better have a really good definition of what we mean by transparency, because we have been accused of, in this meeting tonight, of not being transparent about something that we have been very transparent about. So if we're going to do this again about changing the charter, I don't want this to come back in a year or 2 years or 3 years in the election cycle and say, the board created this secret committee that had these options and we have to have a very clear understanding of what this committee is doing, how it's doing its work, and agreement from everyone on the board. That is what they are doing.
Any other questions or comments?
Mary
Yeah, just wanted to pipe in, follow, just underscore Steve's comment. I think it's imperative that we really clarify just what this committee's task is and what this committee's deliverables are to the board. Because my understanding just from the conversation tonight is that we're talking specifically about the article concerning school closure and no other articles. That's my understanding. I want to make sure that that would be understood as well by the full board.
Yes, that would be.
And then what are the deliverables?
That would be my intention, is that this group would have the singular focus of looking at the part of the Articles of Agreement that addresses school closure, that they would research how others are doing it, come back and share what that research brought forward, and then a recommendation of maybe 1 or 2 options for the board to discuss more fully. Does everybody else, is that Jamie on the same?
Yeah, I wasn't sure if we're still talking about this idea or if my question from 10 minutes ago, I can raise my hand for that again. You know what I'm saying? I wasn't sure if we're going to end now, so I wouldn't like put my hand up.
Okay. We're not going to end. Why don't you make your statement and we can come
okay,
back.
that's fine. Thank you. Thanks for coming. You haven't talked in a while. I just wanted to say that I appreciate, you guys are raising this conversation sort of again in another way. You came an hour ago, you said, I'm wondering if there's an appetite in this board for discussing this charter change. It sounds like there sort of is. This is the impression I'm getting, at least in some capacity, and which I find very important. I don't have a fear of us losing a fiduciary responsibility if that charter were to be changed. I don't share that fear. I get, just since the article came out, I live in Weybridge, we asked all the time the co-op or wherever at the school, that who follow the issue very peripherally, what it means for people outside of Ripton. It seems like this Ripton very centric issue. And I know that you said a minute ago about, not wanting to go just with Ripton getting this change, but doing it for all towns. But is there a way when you think about your situation, like what it means for the whole district, what it means for all towns? There's something that you describe to people in a way that's, like what are the implications of your situation that you're in now, perhaps for the future of it, for everybody else who doesn't live in Ripton?
That's a pretty big question.
The last time you came here, I asked you questions, these are the same thing, so I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, good questions. Let me just take that one in. And part of it is there's a massive unknown here, and a lot of this challenge is from the fact, and this is, I'm just kind of speaking off the cuff here, but when districts were merged and consolidation took place, it seems like a tremendous amount of thought was put into that process and how that was going to work. The backside of that process the withdrawal statutes, some of which were addressed this year, did not have quite as much thought put into it, or it was just older language.
Or any, yeah.
I'll let other people speak on that, but, so, and I think that means there's just this unknown, and even for my voters, I get questions. You know, people will really try and pin me down. What happens if we go back to the State Board of Education? Do we get assigned to a supervisory union?
You don't know.
I would love, I mean, I don't even know that I would love to say. I would say, yes, that's the way 261 reads. That's what we are hearing from attorneys. So far, the State Board of Education has been extremely unwilling to assign us to a different SU or to convert somebody who is an SD to an SU.
Right.
They have both of those powers. They have not wanted to do that. Could it happen? Yes, according to law. Does it look like it's going to? Doesn't seem like it. So that, I mean, that would be a big ramification, I would say, for ACSD, and I'm sure this board and Peter would certainly support that. If ACSD was to become an SU, that has tons of ramifications. I don't think that's going to happen, but that's just me speaking. So that's kind of one potential lane of thinking. Another outcome is if we sort this out on the local level and the SBE doesn't have to have Steve Cash sitting at another meeting, that sends a message, I think, to a lot of people that we were able to sort this out. There are other towns in a similar situation to Ripton that don't have kind of the voting ability that we do. And for them to go back to a district, I think all the other towns need to accept them. So that's a different situation. Ripton's not there yet. After the vote on the 29th, that's where we'll be. So I think there's that one. As far as people in the district, I mean, you'll have to deal with Ripton at your meetings again. I'm here anyways. Hopefully, I mean, we did have, it was kind of an ironic moment. It was a head scratcher. During the SBE review, there was a superintendent, I can't remember what district he was from, but he said, yeah, I'd really like to have people like you in my district. And it kind of dropped my jaw because I was like, one of my board members who's very sharp and is like just willing to do anything, she promptly emailed him and said, can we join your district? And so that, like, hopefully we can just become a part of something. Like, I think we need some protections to come back into the district, but we are not interested in re-navigating this. Anybody who thinks this has been an easy situation for Ripton, I mean, hey, I'll have a 5-hour chat with you why this has not been an easy situation. And the whole conversation about Ripton in this different space, I mean, Chip has that status report over there. I think that's 17 pages,
Right.
Maybe it's 19. I think that is 17 pages of why Ripton doesn't have it all figured out. And we're trying to make our way. But you can reference that document to see some of the challenges that we have if you need to. So I think that's, I mean, there's a lot up in the air right now. And the interesting thing is, I don't think anyone has the answer. If the answers get made here, they get made here. If it gets made at the SBE, that's the next chapter. And sorry, SBE, State Board of Education. Just assuming everybody gets that. So.
Thank you, Steve. We appreciate your frankness through all of this.
That's all I got.
Jamie, was that the end of your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
Peter.
Just a request, Peter, if you could, or Victoria, contact Chris Leopold, just ask him to review his memo from 2018 and just sort of see if there's been any new developments, case law, whatever, that might change his opinion.
In terms of charter, the board's ability to change the charter.
Exactly. That section of the charter.
Well, isn't it, and also if he's the right person to talk to, because it sounds like
That would be great to know.
But like, it
Yes.
sounds like he says he's not, or something.
I'm absolutely baffled by that right now.
It could be that, you know, we didn't necessarily, you know, he works on a contingency, he comes and helps us with negotiations, helps us with that, so he may not be feeling like he's always on call for our.
Yeah, I definitely need to ask some questions because that's on my side, that's just
I
pretty
guess,
frustrating.
yeah, I'm wondering though, I mean, is this a conversation for the attorneys to have, or is this something that, is it a board conversation? I guess I'm just
I'm
wondering.
not sure why it's going through attorneys. Yeah.
Right, I don't think it is an
I'm not
attorney
sure.
conversation, right? Because the attorneys can't change the articles of agreement, right? It's us. Am I wrong? No. Okay. So yeah, I mean, I don't think that it is an attorney conversation. I mean, certainly we respect their
I mean, in terms of
legal
finding out what Peter was
opinion,
asking
and certainly about
Yeah.
the memo, those things are important, but I don't think those are the parties that are negotiating in any way.
I guess the only piece to what Peter Conlon said is if Chris Leopold goes back and looks at
Yes.
case law and finds out that his memo from back then still stands, then that would be probably good to know before the committee starts its work.
Yes. Okay. Mary Heather and then Jen.
And just quick question about process, just for my understanding, you all may already be familiar with this, but if a charter change were to be made, is that something that the board has decision-making authority, or is that something that would need to go out to ACSD voters?
Peter.
So when this issue came up 4 or 5 years ago, different parts of the charter need to be, can be changed by different people. Well, so it either gets changed by the electorate or it can be changed by the board. The opinion we had years ago was that that particular question was something that was in the purview of the board, not of the electorate.
So what we were saying was that we'll revisit that with Chris to see if there's any new precedent that would change his opinion on whether or not we have the ability to change that part of the articles.
And then I guess, Victoria, just for your purposes, and I mean, it sounds like anecdotally, at least from what I'm hearing, that there is an appetite to discuss this and have an ad hoc committee. Do you want to do like a straw vote or something on this, or is that just not necessary?
I think we can after Jen makes
Perfect.
her comment.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think just as far as legal terms before, if you want to check with him before, that's great. I also think if the ad hoc committee, if one is created, comes up with any options, I would feel more comfortable if those were also reviewed before coming to us, just to see if there's any problematic or language that could end up not being appropriate, and therefore, something that would just be a moot point to discuss.
Understood. All right, so do we want to just do a show of hands as to whether or not we are in agreement that we should create an ad hoc committee to look at the closure piece of the Articles of Agreement, that committee will do some research on what has been done elsewhere and come to the board to share the research done and with some options that we can discuss.
Straw poll for
So,
now.
a straw vote. If all those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, looks like everybody's in agreement. Terrific.
Doesn't mean we'll be in agreement afterwards.
It does not mean, this might be the only moment that we're in agreement, but let's
Good for us.
Let's bathe in that.
Very good.
Yeah. Okay, so if you are interested in sitting on this ad hoc committee, I'm envisioning it to be 3 or 4 people. Please let me know prior to Wednesday, and then I will share with the board who those people will be. All right.
They can get security.
I mean, so can I just one more thing about this?
Yes.
So what if more than 3 people want to be on it? Like, which I think will probably happen.
Well,
So-
then it's not going to be 3 Middlebury people. I will try to have a selection of
Right.
people from different backgrounds, who can bring different things to the table.
Just laughing. Okay.
The chair has very few powers on this board, but that is one of them, is to select committees.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I just think that it seems like it's very, like a huge issue. It's the issue that frankly, that's all people talk about when I meet people at the co-op or whatever. And it seems like if people want to talk about it, there should be a space for them to talk about it. And if this committee has 5 people on it, that's okay. I guess that would be my feeling.
Yep,
I
but I
don't
do
know.
think that the point of the committee is to bring
Yeah, okay.
whatever it is to
Okay.
the board so that we can all talk about it. I think
Okay,
that there'll
okay,
be
okay.
opportunity for everybody
Fair.
to talk about it. And I just find, right, it's a fine balance between having too many people to not be able to all get together and having too few people to actually do the work. And
Yeah.
sort of 3 or 4 feels like the right number, but
This committee's not going to be voting on anything, it's not
Right.
going to be, so it's simply an
Right.
informational,
Doing
fact-finding
work.
committee. So I don't know why, it has to be, everybody has to have a voice on this committee. It's not that kind of a committee. The full board is the only one that can vote on these issues, and there's nothing that committee could do
without
the board's
our decision.
approval,
This
so.
is true.
Okay.
Right, because the
Thank you.
board did not authorize the committee to take action, so
Yeah,
that
right.
we can't.
Right.
We can just bring forward, or the committee, I should say, could just bring forward whatever they find.
Okay, with that said, are we ready to move on?
Yes. If I can just
Yes.
add one thing, so just so there's clarity, in the original petition that Ripton presented to ACSD, there was 2 article changes in there. There was Article 8, the voting, and then Article 14. Just to be clear, the only thing we are talking about is Article 14.
Correct.
Those Article 8 conversations, those have not moved ahead in our space or anything like that. So just if people are referencing that old petition, any of that conversation around Article 8, that's not what we're talking about.
Correct.
It's Article 14, so that petition is basically half
Correct.
of what it was. So,
Yep.
just to
Yep,
clarify.
thank you for clarifying. Okay, now we're ready to move on.
Thank you, Steve.
Yes.
Yes,
that's-
thank you for the time this evening.
You can stay and.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Sorry,
I have more than enough to do. Time.
Good luck.
You've got a fuel bid coming up.
Yeah. Thank you, Steve.
Sorry. Peter, any attorney stuff, I will be in touch with you. And
Right.
Victoria, I will just reach out to you directly.
Great.
To have some of these conversations.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, let's see, okay. We are on to report of the board number 3, action mentor contract language. This is something that Peter will talk about, but basically it was something that we were sending on to the negotiations committee, and then I was reminded that the negotiations committee hadn't really been activated this session because we didn't think that there was going to be anything for the negotiations committee to do. So there is this one thing, and so we figured we'd just throw it in and we'd do it as a whole board.
I can get through this in 1 minute or less.
Okay, go. Are we timing?
We're timing.
So you can see the suggested motion there. This is a change in the language. You can see that the contract states that the board can increase the stipend amount. The program has been retooled and reinvigorated, and now the mentors take on more than one mentee, and so we've increased the cost commensurately. Most mentors will have probably 2 is probably the mean. Caitlin, is that about right?
We said no more than 3.
Yeah.
And they should be job alike. So where we have unique jobs, they're paired one-on-one. Where we have multiple people in a grade level or in a content area, they're paired up to 3-on-1. The average 2-to-1 for mentors and mentees.
And is this part of the conversations that happened this summer in terms of the onboarding new staff.
Yep.
This is a result of that. Okay. Steve?
It is, in my opinion, one of the strongest things that you can do to increase the mentorship of new teachers. It is one of the reasons teachers leave, because they are not supported strongly. And what I've seen from what you guys are doing to revamp the mentor program, it seems like it is a much stronger opportunity. I would strongly encourage the board to support this. So, is that a motion? Yes, I would be willing. I mean, it seemed like there were other people who wanted to talk.
Why don't you put a motion on the table?
I would make a motion to accept the language as presented by the superintendent to modify the master contract for mentors.
I'll second. Great. Any questions, comments? All right. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
I'll abstain.
Great. It passes. Thank you. All right. And
The fuel
on
bid
to the
memo.
fuel bid memo. Is this you or Logan? Logan, we're back to you.
Uh-oh, because
Oh, right.
Pretty quiet over
Well,
there.
school district, oh, sorry.
We're making
Every
jokes
other
wondering if the kids are
district- so
asleep,
this-
sorry.
Yes, the kids are asleep. For the easy one, have no distractions. Every other school district solicits bids for fuel oil and propane. This year's lowest bids were the same companies as last year, Files Brothers for propane and Champlain Valley Fuels for fuel oil. Last year, Files Brothers, this is just a side, in case you are interested in it. Last year's propane fuel, Files Brothers bid was $1.63. This year it's $1.85. For fuel oil, Champlain Valley Fuels winning bid last year was $2.35. This year it's $3.60.
Wow.
Anyways, not surprisingly, the suggestion is to go with the low bidder, which, as I said, is Files Brothers for propane at $1.85 fixed price, and Champlain Valley Fuels for fuel oil at a fixed price of $3.60.
Great. Can I get a motion?
I move that we accept the bids as stated and take the lowest bids. as you
I'll second
suggest.
And Barb second.
Yeah.
Any questions for Logan?
I just wish I could
On
get my
this?
fuel oil at that price.
I was thinking that too.
Okay, no questions. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great, thank you, Logan. Appreciate it. And, all right, other. Any other? Anyone have other? See no other, can I have an emotion to adjourn?
A motion to adjourn?
I'll second.
A motion to adjourn. Thank you, all right, we are adjourned at 8:23.
Nice.
Thank you all.